Dr. Stephen Hassan is back, and it's been way too long, but you have been very, very busy, and I'm very happy to have you back here on Stand Up. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Pete, I'm a fan of yours, as you know, and I love the stand up and be counted motif of your work.
We've done something really wonderful here that I think you'll love to learn about if you didn't already kind of know. But we've built a really nice community around the show, and I host these hangouts twice a week now. Since Trump got reelected, it was twice a week. Before that, for the last 3 years, it was, since the pandemic, once a week. And it's created community, and I didn't set out to do that, and so it's just a beautiful kind of organic thing. And I'm good at hosting these hangouts, and we have a great group of people, but I just want to get your thoughts on the importance of that in these times.
So just to be clear, it's in real life or it's a hangout online?
It's always online, but we have met in real life once, and we're doing a gathering again at the end of March.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Building relationships, building community is vital in this time of uncertainty and stress and chaos. And I am a big fan of doing what we can to meet people in real life, because we're humans, and this whole digital environment that's been created the last few decades, human mind has not evolved yet to cope with that, and with the lack of data privacy regulation and regulation of the big companies, we're getting our brains hacked by the millions with AI and bad actors. So I'm very much warning people to become educated consumers and realize that our phones are tools that we should use, and we shouldn't be addicted with the dopamine addiction that was created by BJ Fogg at the Stanford Persuasion Lab. And yeah, but hey, if any of your listeners are in the Northampton, Massachusetts area and want to meet in real life, come find me, because I'm trying to get people in my physical community getting together to say we need a battle plan, and we need each other to support each other during this time.
Absolutely. If you're up there, definitely reach out to Dr. Hassan and be a part of his community. And that's such a really important point. So let's talk about your work and how it's really important right now, and as it has been for a long time. I've told people a little bit about you in the intro, and a lot of people are already familiar with your work, but just kind of remind us where your expertise on cults, having been in one yourself, coincided with, what do we want to call it, the Trump movement, the MAGA movement, because you wrote this book years ago, and we talked, during Trump's first administration. But when did you recognize that movement, and how do you define it as a cult?
Thanks. So my backstory is, first of all, I grew up in Flushing, Queens, 1.3 miles from Donald Trump's childhood home. And I was recruited into a front group of the Moonies cult at Queens College in 1974, the same month Patty Hearst was abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army. I got radicalized. I became a right-wing fascist, dropped out of college, recruited people, indoctrinated them, and was in the room with Sun Myung Moon, who claimed to be the Messiah, when he talked about how democracy was satanic. We had to infiltrate the government and take it over and make a theocracy. And when he even said that we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violate our rules. And I was like, yes, Father. And seriously, I'm making a joke of it, but it's not funny. And it was a near fatal van crash due to sleep exhaustion, 2 weeks in the hospital away from the cult, visiting my sister, a surprise deprogramming intervention, my father crying and asking me to listen to the ex-members, and me wanting to prove I wasn't in a cult, and learning about Chinese communist brainwashing. And the light bulb started turning on because the parallels were so obvious. And when I woke up May 11th, 1976, I went like, what happened to my mind? I got hacked. And so now you're meeting me 49 years later, and I have made it my mission in life to learn about social psychology and hypnosis. I've become a licensed therapist. I've written 4 books. I do online courses and have a podcast, and got a PhD, and did a quantitative study on my bite model of authoritarian control, which answers the question, how do you tell the difference between an ethical, legitimate group and an unethical authoritarian cult? So I've actually created a scientific foundation to answer that question. And to answer your question, sorry for the long intro.
No, it's fascinating, and people can go learn more about the bite model, which I'm sure you'll talk about here.
Yeah, but in 2018, my book agent said, I want you to do the Cult of Trump book. And I went, nah, it's, I'm not political. And besides, it's going to alienate everybody who follows Trump. And he was like, they're not going to read it anyway. You should write a book for everyone else. Simon and Schuster's interested. We can get a deal. And I thought long and hard about it, but I knew he was a malignant narcissist for sure, because I grew up in New York and I knew about Donald Trump. So I knew I could talk about the cult leader playbook, malignant narcissism, and compare him with Jim Jones and Hubbard and Moon. But I didn't realize there were actual authoritarian cults who were puppet masters of Trump, who were bringing tens of millions of followers. And that was a revelation for me that I wrote about in The Cult of Trump, that came out October of 2019. And this last September of 2024, Simon and Schuster re-released it with a short forward by George Conway talking about the GOP becoming a cult. A former conservative, lawyer, former husband of Kellyanne Conway. And I did an afterward. And so my mission now is trying to encourage everybody to understand what, my influence continuum, the bite model, understand psychological warfare, and to start reaching out in a effective way with family and friends of MAGA, to help them exit the cult of Trump, because they will, if they're given an exit ramp without shaming them, calling them names, etc., etc. Because that's what's happening, is people are realizing we didn't vote for this crap that's happening. So I'm hearing more and more. So I want to do courses where I'm role playing how to have a conversation with a family member or friend that actually is oriented to empowering people to think for themselves. And I'll just say this and then I'll shut up for a minute. What doesn't work is trying to attack the leader, the doctrine, or the policy of any cult. That will make them more defensive and make them move away from you. But adopting a curious, respectful, warm, hey, I know you, I respect you, tell me how you believe what you believe. I really want to step into your shoes, and asking questions that stimulate critical thinking and reality testing, because people will exit themselves because they have doubts.
Yes, and creating those doubts is a hard thing to do, and it's hard to do what you suggested doing. People don't even necessarily always have the incentive. A lot of people have given up on their friends and family members, but you're encouraging people not to, and to try to connect. And I wonder, as you describe the technique with how the kind of conversation could or should go for it to be effective, if there's even a chance. Have you done this on tape? Have you tried to talk to specifically to Trump supporting folks using your system that we can watch?
The answer is not yet.
Can I set that up? Like, is there a reason why that hasn't happened?
I think that most people are so primed against me
Yeah.
Although I have been on Joe Rogan, I have been on Megyn Kelly, Glenn Beck even did a whole YouTube using my bite model, telling his people how to deprogram the people who are anti-Trump. So I'm open to it. If you want to help set up a context, I just take the position of, hey, I'm a human being. I'm open-minded. If you can persuade me to join your point of view, please do. But in the meantime, let's respectfully go back and forth. And here's the thing. What works with people in a cult who don't think they're in a cult is to talk to them about another cult that they agree is that cult. So
Right.
Chinese communist brainwashing, they'll talk to me about that.
Right.
Or pimps and traffickers, they'll listen and talk to me about that. So I discuss those methods and techniques, and then I want to ask the people to tell me your experience and how what you're believing and what you're a part of isn't like those other contexts.
You in your own life come in contact and engage with Trump supporting friends, family members, strangers, people anywhere?
Sure, if they'll talk with me.
Yeah.
The issue is often when they hear that I'm the author of it, they act like I am possessed by Satan. And many of them are in Christian-esque cults, particularly New Apostolic Reformation, which has 30 to 40 million Americans in it, that the media has misconstrued them as Christians, but they're actually in mind control cults that use Christian language. But the key is understanding the leaders of these cults say they're prophets or apostles who speak to God directly, and that they can protect their followers from demons, that they are able to exorcise demons out of their followers.
I'm sure you probably know even more about the journalist who wrote the article about that group, that movement. But Stephanie McCrumman in the Atlantic, I've been trying to get her on the show now. She wrote a piece.
I read it. Yeah, I mean, I've been helping people out of these types of groups since 79, 80. 1980. It's the same kind of pyramid, authoritarian, submit to your leader, your central figure, your discipleship partner, and submit up the pyramid. And this kind of, black and white, us versus them, good versus evil. All other churches are evil except us. And God told me Trump won the 2020 election. Therefore, that's what God told me. So that's what reality is. And that's why people have been invulnerable to considering. Trump's own people said that Trump lost the 2020 election. They can't entertain a doubt because they've been programmed, like I was programmed in the Moonies, never to allow a doubt because I interpret it as evil spirits invading me.
I mean, first of all, what is your relationship with Satan, Dr. Hassan, while we're on the
I
record?
don't believe in Satan. I'm a Jew, but I believe there's evil action for sure. And I believe that it's my job to help repair the world and speak up for innocent people, speak out for human rights, women's rights, gay rights, indigenous rights, or the rights of anyone who's downtrodden.
I wonder, you talk about what they think in terms of that you're a demon, that anybody outside of their group is potentially, a corrupting force at best, a demon at worst, I guess.
No, they really believe this. And I honestly, Pete, I was taken to see the Exorcist movie as a Moonie in 1974. Okay. I didn't believe in demons or Satan. I was Jewish. I was taken to see this movie. Then we were vanned up to Tarrytown, New York, where Moon himself said God made the Exorcist movie. This movie is a prophecy of what will happen if you leave the unification movement.
Oh, that's a convenient.
And I believed it. It was my moment of what I refer to as phobia indoctrination, the installation of an irrational fear that I couldn't trust my own mind anymore because I was so afraid of demonic possession.
It's so hard for, I think it's very hard for many of us to understand. It's hard for me to understand that.
So let me use a parallel because it's something that I've been spending a lot of time with
I thought
later.
weird things, just to be clear, like I thought weird things, things like that ish growing up because of the Catholic Church, and heaven and hell. And I, a little bit, but I didn't think there were like demons out there, human beings. I never got any of that. That never came to my table, to my classroom, crossed my mind. Never heard it. Never heard.
Right.
Never
Well,
heard
that's why it's hard for you to imagine
right.
someone like me who didn't believe it at all, then believing it so strongly that I was willing to jump in front of a bullet to protect Moon from Satan, or fasting for Nixon, who I hated, and then fasting because Moon said God wants him to be president despite Watergate.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to believe.
But and I'm telling you, if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't believe it either. But what I want to say to your listeners is, how many of, I'll ask the question to you and people can answer it themselves. Have you ever seen a stage hypnotist show?
I have in college. I saw a couple.
Okay.
And
So
I do a lot of them as a comedian.
okay. So, but the thing is some people think it's all staged, and it's typically not staged, except that the stage hypnotist tests out people in his audience for who's going to be most responsive to the hypnotic suggestions, brings them up on stage, the most compliant, hypnotizable people, and he'll tell them things like, you're fully naked, and they're fully clothed, but you're fully naked on stage, and they act like they're naked, or they're told they need to pee, but their feet are glued to the stage and everyone's laughing and the person's like in pain because they have to pee. That's a real experience. When you're hypnotized, you're not thinking for yourself.
Right.
The instructions of the hypnotist kind of take over your command center. And the thing about mind control cults is what they're doing is they're creating a cult trance identity. So it maintains over time this, and then there's a whole ideology that's attached to it. That's what's different than a stage hypnotic demonstration versus somebody who's been brainwashed.
I remember, I feel like I went up to one of the kids who ended up getting, being the last one up there and making a fool of himself after. And I was like, hey, man, you're just acting, right? He's like, nah, man, I think he hypnotized me. I don't even remember what happened. And I was like, I was like, are you stupid? Like, how could you let that happen? Because you embarrassed yourself. Like, I would have not wanted, I went on stage plenty, embarrassed myself plenty, but on purpose as a comedian, I thought it was just ridiculous. And I remember just being very judgmental about it. But the truth is, in this case, they're good at finding people who would be most vulnerable to.
Exactly. So the thing is that it's a real phenomenon, and I want people to take it seriously, that people can be given these crazy beliefs and they act as if it's true.
Well, let's get to Trump then. Like, how am I not in a cult of progressive thinking with all of my beliefs versus the person I'm currently arguing with on Facebook about the trade deal? Like, they're saying I've got Trump derangement syndrome, which is their way of saying, I have a mental issue, I guess. And I'm saying they're in a cult, which I believe. But what's the difference between me and that guy?
Great question. So at the risk of holding up one of my graphics, which is on my website, freedomofmind.com, for free, you can download it. Think about influence on a continuum of ethical influence to unethical influence. This is authoritarian brainwashing cults. These are healthy cults or groups or organizations. So what's the difference? You have informed consent, respect for your conscience. You can read whatever you want to read, talk to whoever you want to talk to, leave without fear or harassment. And here, it's about obedience, dependency, fear, dogma, malignant narcissistic leaders. So when people say I'm in the cult of Soros, or I'm brainwashed by the libtards, I'm like, fascinating. Tell me more. And they don't know. They just have the talking point that I have Trump derangement syndrome or I'm in the cult of Soros. So when I say, tell me more, tell me what makes you say that, because let's talk about it. Because if I'm in a cult, I don't want to be. So let's discuss it. What are your criteria? And they don't have any. And then I tell them about the Moonies, and I tell them about Chinese communist brainwashing and Lifton's 8 criteria. And they listen to that. But the issue often is they are on their frickin' phone 8 to 12 hours a day getting controlled. And so when I did a TEDx talk, Pete.
But aren't I too?
I can't answer for you except to ask you, are you afraid to hear another point of view? Are you afraid to hear a critique of the Democrats or of a Democratic leader? Are you afraid that people will turn on you and shun you if you express a counter opinion or belief? And I have a free anonymous tool right now at bitemodel.com. We don't track you, whatever, but you can literally fill out a 40-question survey, and it will give you a number of how authoritarian your relationship is. Some people are in controlling marriages or corporations or large group awareness trainings, or they're dependent on their therapist. You can fill it out for yourself and reality tests. And that's what I want to say to your audience is, if it's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. And we need to have values. We need to have integrity, conscience. We need to have critical thinking, reality testing, and the truth will out.
Those words were on the wall at the FBI. They just painted over them: integrity, conscience, diversity. I mean, part of the cult would seem to also be, and I know you've talked about this, erasing other ways of thinking. I mean, a lot of religions do this to not ask any questions, and there's only one God, and that is a lot of what you see right now. They're banning words. For all the talk of the left being politically correct and censoring speech, it's always been something the right does, from burning books to literally banning words like, forget about all the LGBT stuff, which is so egregious, but banning scientific words like emissions and greenhouse gases and climate, like that. What about that? What about banning words, erasing history? How important that is that to creating the occult thinking?
100%. It's straight out of the Bite model. It's straight out of Orwell's 1984, which he wrote about communism, by the way. And Jim Jones used that as a guidebook for his Jonestown cult, where people were killing their own children and murdering a congressman. So we really, I mean, people are fascinated by the topic of cults. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that's going out there. People who are being interviewed who don't know what they're talking about, frankly, or documentaries that are afraid to actually teach people how to reality test. They're just telling, trauma porn stories of how people have been abused. And what we need is a massive psychoeducational program where we're adults wanting to save our planet and make it okay for our kids and grandchildren. And lastly, because you talked about emissions a minute ago, Pete, I interviewed David Lipsky about his book on climate science denial, and he found out my former cult, the Moonies, Washington Times, was the center for climate science denial and disinformation for 50 years.
The Moonies owned the Washington Times.
Correct.
And they were the center of
propaganda.
Well, they got
Just like Big Tobacco said, no, smoking doesn't cause cancer, even though they knew it did. The fossil fuel corporations know that we're warming the planet and causing catastrophes,
I
but they
feel like
want the people to not think about it. So they're banning emissions and other things like that.
I feel like anybody that has a really important idea, concept, or initiative like yourself would like to best see it implemented at scale to have a greater impact. But I think if we're being serious at this point, we're so far from, right now we're just trying to make sure Medicaid stays funded. So trying to get any funding for any nonprofit, for any idea, any initiative, much less the government itself, is so hard. It feels like that the best thing that people can do with your work is do it as much as they can one-on-one and in small groups with their friends and family, which is also something you've always wanted us to do, and to take your bite model and try to apply it there. But it would seem that that's where the most impact is still going to take place, because we're not going to see anything like this be scaled up. I mean, you're not even invited on corporate media anymore, right?
Right.
I mean, so it's like I think you have some very thoughtful ideas, important ideas that have clearly been effective, and you can show their effectiveness, and you've had a lot of success here. But it would seem to me that's where we're at right now. Is it's still something that,
But there are people who are wealthy, billionaires, who want to oppose what's happening, but they
yeah.
just don't know what to do. So there are people with resources, if not the government. They just need to make the effort to learn and realize this, we're in a mind control war right now, and we're losing because people are so ignorant about what's being done to their minds.
Where's the best place to find you now? You're on YouTube. You've got a pretty big following there. You've got Substack. You've got your podcast. Obviously, everybody should buy your books. But like, if people want access to you, I'd love to have you come by one of our hangouts and do a little Q&A.
Love to invite me.
And I will. You're invited this
Yeah.
Thursday night if you want. But you know, if people are looking to support you and get in contact with you, where's the best place? You go live on you. Look at you. I remember when I was trying to help you to get set up, and now you're like
You were teaching me, like I was afraid to start a podcast. I'm in the third year of my podcast. And I thank you for your support. You've been a good friend and an encourager of my work, and I really appreciate it. When you asked me to come back on, I was like, of course, don't be ridiculous. I'm honored. And I think there are a lot of celebrity influencers also that follow me at Cult Expert on different social media, whether it's Instagram or
That's good.
or Blue Sky or Twitter. I'm still on X occasionally, less on
Who have
that.
you met? Have you met any of those celebrities?
I other than former clients who I can't ask for help from, no, but I'm starting to hear from people who are
Good.
following me, and
That's good.
and maybe they'll have me on or let me interview them. I'm especially interested in influencers who have a cult story that might like to do a live with me.
Well, you mentioned earlier healthy cults. And before I let you go, what did you mean by that? What's a healthy cult?
Oh, they're Red Cross, YMCA, Jewish community groups that I am involved with. There's so many healthy groups, and so the issue is really informed consent, respect for your conscience, able to ask critical questions, able to have transparency of leadership. If you're asking for money, let me see the books of where the money's being spent. Just basic, and really download the influence continuum and stick it up at your library or at your office if you're a clinician. The more people who start realizing we need to not just do education about media literacy or disinformation, we need to teach people reality testing.
There you go. So great to catch up with you. I look forward to doing it again. If you want to stop by Thursday or any Monday or Thursday at 8.
Send me a link, and it needs to get in my calendar, but I'd love to do a follow-up with you,
Awesome.
Pete. I'm a
Awesome. Love having
supporter
you.
of yours.
All right. Thank you very much, my friend.
See ya. Bye.
All right. I hit stop. We got it. That's great. Thank you very much.
So let
sir.
me know when it comes out and we'll put it on our social media.
I absolutely will. I think it's going to be Thursday or Friday.
Okay, so send it to
I'll send you all the links. I'll email it all to you. And
perfect.
I'm so happy to connect with you again today.
Likewise, my friend. Be
All
well.
right.
Stand up.